Okay, so now we're going to start looking at the edge of the cardigan, the front edges and the neck. So if you've lengthened your cardigan like I have, and you're looking to work now along this edge, you'll see that on the hexagon part of it, we've got lots of nice ready-made stitches to work into, which is lovely for an edge. Quite often you are working into the row ends when you try and make an edging. So it's likely that you've never done that before. And when you go to the bottom of the front edge of the cardigan, that's obviously where you're going to want to start. And you might be thinking, oh, I don't really know how to work stitches into there. And it is a bit tricky. So what we're going to do, instead of trying to work into the stitch, we're just going to put 2 stitches in behind the post at the edge. I'm hoping you're going to like the way it looks, because it can sometimes look neater to actually work into the side of the stitch, but it is a bit of a strange thing to have to do, especially as a beginner. So we're going to work as if we've got chain spaces behind this end stitch. What it'll do as well, it'll help to encase any little bits of, as you can see, rough edge where I've sewn the ends in and snipped them off. So that should look quite good. Okay, so we've got options when it comes to the neck edging, but both options are going to start with a row of half double crochet like we did on the cuff. So again, I'm going to make a slip knot and put it through the back. So I am going to start by working into that last stitch, but I'm actually working it sideways. Okay, so that just ensures that that first stitch is going to meet up with the edge. If we were just to go straight into the space, might end up with a bit of a step between there and there. So I like to just go into that first stitch. It kind of anchors it well as well, because it's a stitch rather than a space. Okay, and then I'm going to, this time, just do a chain 1. As long as you leave it quite loose, it's fine to do a chain 1 and then do half trebles. It actually keeps it a little bit neater than doing the 2 chains that you might have been told to do when you do a half treble or half double. Okay, so yarn over, and I'm going to work 2 half double crochets into that gap. Okay, and the same in the next gap. So I'm going to ignore that stitch there. I'm going to do 2 half doubles, sorry. And then next. So hopefully that feels quite straightforward. And it will make quite a neat finish. And it's only this part we need to do this, and around the neck, because the rest, the great thing about Hexa cardigan is that most of it does have proper, in inverted commas, stitches to work into all around the edge, because of the nature of the hexagon having the 6 sides. Nearly there. So we've nearly worked our way past this tricky part now, which hopefully not finding too tricky. One thing we don't want is to have put so many stitches in that it's going frilly. Maybe slightly frilly there on my edge, but I think once we get the hem on as well, it shouldn't be too bad. If you are finding that for some reason that is looking way too frilly and you feel there's too many stitches there, what you can do is reduce the number of stitches. So you could do 2 in there, 1 in there, 2 in there, 1 in there, 2 in there, and just play around. It's always a little bit of trial and error when you're working into the ends of rows, as to how tight and what the tension's going to be like. It'll depend what kind of crocheter you are. The other thing you can do is drop down a hook size. So you could still put the same number of stitches in, but drop down a hook size. And in fact, if I find when I've finished working this row that I do feel it's pulling and it is a little bit frilly, I might just go back and do that again with a 5.5, I'm on there, a 6mm hook, aren't I? Yeah. So I've probably do a 5.5 mil hook, and just so that they pull in a little bit more. But for now, I think I'm okay with that. And we are going to block this at the end, so the shape will sit a bit flatter. And when we get the hem on as well, I think that should start behaving itself. But with all things, we'll find out. Okay, so that's the last couple of side rows to work into. Pink one's the last one. Sorry, I'm going out of view. And then we're back to having those nice stitches. So that's the first one, obviously. And then it's pretty much a clear run now up until we get to the neck. So when we get to the neck, we've got the same thing happening. So I'm just going to give you a little bit of a pointer when you get to the where the front meets the neck, because we might just want to pull that in slightly. We might not want to put 2 in there and then go into there, because it could sort of stretch it out a little bit. So I'll come back to you when I get to that point. But other than that, we've got a nice straight run now of ordinary stitches to work our half double crochets into. Okay, so I've come to that tricky part where the front is meeting the neck. So we're going back from being able to work into ordinary stitches to working down the into the gap of the stitch. So before we get there, we've got this tricky part here where the sleeves joined. So rather than just skipping over there, because we don't want to leave a really big hole, but equally we don't want to put too many stitches around that curve, because we could end up with a stretched neck edge. We want it to pull in slightly. So a trick that I would recommend is to yarn over. We're going to go into that corner space of the where the granny hexagon corner was on that hexagon there, and then go in and don't finish the stitch. So obviously we're doing a decrease, and then go in to that first space down the side of the row end, and then yarn over, pull through. So we have put a stitch in there, there's no hole, but we haven't created too many stitches here that's going to make it frilly and stretch. So we've only got 1 stitch, but it's bridging the gap of that awkward corner. So we're going to do the same thing on the other neck edge. So let's go, let me film that for you. So we've just done 1, effectively we've done 1 in there because we've kind of crossed it over from there. So let's do another 1 down the side like we did on the hem, and we'll do what we did before. We'll do 2 half double crochets in each row end. As I say, you just need to have a look at it as well. If you've done it and you've followed exactly what I've done and you're thinking, oh, it looks too stretched, or it looks too baggy, or it's curling. See, I'm having a quick look to see if I'm happy with that. Yeah, I think it's sitting flat. It's not frilly, it's pulling in. So I'm just going to keep it there for now. It might be that on the next row I do another decrease just to stop this collar starting to stand up and stick up. But obviously I'll guide you through that. Okay, so I'm doing 2 in here. And this part here is just that seam. So I am going to just skip right across into that next gap, and that will help to pull that seam together a bit more. Because we use the decorative joining method, it does tend to try and open up a little bit. So we can combat that a little bit. Okay. So I'm fairly happy with how that's looking, but as I say, on the next row I might just need to make another decrease in that same space just to stop that neck becoming too upright. I want it to lay flat when you wear it. There's 2 in there, 2 in here. Nearly at that tricky corner again. So what we did, we put 1 into that row end, but then we decreased. So we yarned over, go into there, come out, go into that next space, yarn over, pull through all 4. So that gives us that's nice sort of pulled in effect that we've had on the other corner of the neck. Okay, and then we're ready to work down this side again. So now we're back to working into the stitches. So putting half doubles all the way down. And obviously when you get to the bottom, you will have the row ends to work into again, like you've done at the very beginning. Okay, so I'll let you do that, and then we're going to, for this cardigan, I'm going to make the same rib effect that I did on the cuff. So if you'd like to do yours like that, that's what you'll be able to do following this video. Okay, so I'll meet you at the other end of the front. Okay, so I've got to the very end now of the other side of the front. So I'm going to do my last stitch into that actual stitch like we did at the beginning, but obviously to the side. Okay, so there we've got to the very end. So our front post and back post stitches are now going to go around the stems of these half double crochets, but slightly different thing is that we're going to be working and we're going to be turning the work. On the cuff we could just go round and round and round and round, so it's slightly different, but I don't think you'll find it too tricky. We'll get the first row done because obviously you're just going to work around the front of one, back of the other, front of the other. So we're going to just chain 1 and turn. And again, it's going to be up to you how many rows you do, how deep of a rib you want. Now, because the rib does pull in slightly, I'm going to try and not decrease again at the neck edge and just see what it looks like. I'm probably going to do maybe 3 or 4 rows and then try it on. And if it's standing up and it looks silly, I'm just going to have to suck it up and redo the rows with a little bit of decreasing going on at the neck corners. The reason I want to avoid it is because in a front post and back post stitch it can look a bit strange to decrease, but obviously if it does look too pointy and sticky up the collar, I would want to change it. Okay, so if you want to do the same as me, we're going to chain 1 and then we're going to work around the stem of the next stitch. So obviously we've changed 1 above that last stitch. We don't need to work into that one. So we're going to back post, crochet around that one, front post, crochet around the next. Okay, so just be careful you don't get confused and put more than 1 around each stitch, because I've done 1, 2. So I've done the 2. I haven't done that one because that was the start. We're chained above. I've done the 2 that are in down the side of that post, and now I'm up to these next 2. Okay, so don't lose track because you can end up going around it more than once if you're not careful, and that will increase the number of stitches you've got. Okay, and just try and remember to alternate front post, back post. And you will find that your stitches that are down the side of the post, they're kind of almost in clusters. It's just the way that we've done it. It's not ideal, but it was a much easier way to spread them out. And the front post, back post rib should start to even out the look of it. But yeah, you might just find that a little bit strange to start with. And don't get hung up on whether the last stitch is going to end on the same, you know, if the last stitch isn't a front post or one that's sitting to the front, it doesn't matter. It's such a small rib. There's so many stitches, it's really not going to be noticeable if it doesn't match. If you've accidentally put one too many stitches on the other side, it really is not going to matter. So this tutorial, this course is very, very open and easy, and you don't need to get hung up on the maths, and you don't even need to follow a written pattern. Obviously written patterns are great. Written patterns will have their place as you progress, but for now, getting used to creating different stitches and the satisfaction of having made something that you can wear is enough to keep you going, give you that determination to get stuck into the patterns. And obviously the fact that this cardigan can be made to fit is really appealing. You might just want to make these cardigans forever, never make anything else, and that's absolutely fine. Okay, keep going. And you'll find there are written patterns out there for this type of cardigan. I certainly haven't invented it. Whoever did should have a medal, I think. But yeah, I think to just do it without a pattern just takes away some of the stress that you can sometimes encounter when you first start crocheting. Okay, keep going. Right, so we kind of got into what I say is a bit easier territory now, but if we have a look, I'm actually quite pleased with that. It's looking nice and neat. Obviously, these stitches reach further into the front of the cardigan than these ones, but it's really not going to matter. And the good thing is, obviously, now that we've changed, we've turned the row, we're working on the inside of the cardigan now, these stitches look the same front and back. So the more you get in there, the more rows of front post, back post. It's not the type of stitch that has to be a certain way around. So it doesn't matter how many rows you do, which row you end on, and you don't need to do any other edging because you're going to get this nice ribbed effect. Okay, so I'll meet you around the other side. Okay, so I just thought I'd take you through this little corner again when we're doing this first row of front post, back post, because you might get a bit confused. So I've just done the last half double crochet going around the front of the post, and then the next two half double crochets, one of them is where we decreased. So we started in this stitch, we finished in that stitch, and there's the top of it. Okay, so I'm due to do a round the back post. So I'm actually going in there all the way around the stem. So always still look for the vertical part of the stitch, and you're going to work around there. And that will neaten it up as well. It'll bring it and pull it together and make it look more like an ordinary stitch. But you can see that we've gone in there and in there to pull it all in. And I'm quite pleased that I think I'm not going to need to do that decrease that we talked about. I do think that the rib effect is going to make it look quite neat without me having to do any more, which is good. Okay, so that's how to get across the decrease. So I'm going back post and then, okay. And then I'm back into these tricky ones that are sort of clustered together when we're going along that neck edge. By the way, you will only have this awkward part, it's just occurred to me, if you did increase the size of the back. So I increased the size of the back width to give me a wider back neck. If you ended up with your panels meeting the front and you've just got a small area to work around for your neck, that's fine as well. It just means that your front of your cardigan will meet exactly in the middle. It won't have any gap either side. And once you've put this rib on, you might find you've got an overlap like you would have if you were putting buttons on it. But that's absolutely fine if you want to wear it like that and you didn't want to make extra width at the back. Because as I say, this is tailor-made, it's your design. It's just a general way to create a cardigan that you can then tweak, make it your own. So this is the second version I've made of this cardigan. The other was more like a little shrug with a short sleeve, 3/4 length sleeve. Right, so I've reached the decrease again now. So I'm just going to find the stem of the stitch and work around it. Just like before, it's going to pull in and neaten up that row. So that row now looks a lot neater than it did before we did our back post stitch. Keep going. Okay, and I'm back to my apologies, that is actually the stitch that we used across that back seam. Yeah, so we did something slightly different there, didn't we? We skipped over that gap, but as I say, that's pulled that in and neatened that off now as well. Should take more notice of where I'm up to, shouldn't I, really? Okay, keep going. Okay, so just approaching the other place where we decreased. Okay, so that's where we're putting the next one. And the next one is the decrease. Okay, so you see it going across from there to there, but it's this stem here that we're interested in. This one's around the front. And again, that's going to neaten it up and pull it all together, especially when we get this next one in. Okay, so you can see that's taking shape quite nicely now. So I just need to work my way all the way down this front side. So when I get to the bottom, all I'm going to do is, like we did before, I'm going to work my last one into that last half double crochet there, chain one and turn, and we're going to do like we did on the cuff. We're going to go around the one that's in front, around the one that's at the back. So it's fairly straightforward because you'll always see one face in the front and one face in the back. You know, you'll know where to work, but I will just I'll meet you on that side and we can just do a few together, and then you can work as many rows as you like of this. Okay, so I've just come to the very last back post crochet. Whoops. There. Okay, so I'm just going to slip stitch into the previous row. Okay, and then chain one and turn. Right, so we're actually starting with the back post this time. So don't let that fool you, don't work straight into this one here. So I'm going to yarn over, go around the back. Sorry. And the first ones can usually be a bit tricky, just because they're so close to the edge. But once you get past that one, you're good to go. So we've done our first one. Yeah, so just make sure when you're slip stitching into the end and when you're doing your chain one, you are going to work into the first stitch that you see on the that's sticking forward, or in this case backwards, just so you know you're not going to increase or decrease. Okay, so I've done that one, and now we're into our front post. So as I say, this row should be a little bit more intuitive because we've got the front post, back post stitches already there from the previous row. Oops, split the yarn. Okay, so we're just going to carry on in this way until we've got the sort of depth of rib that you want, and that is entirely up to you. You could make a huge rib. If you kept on with it long enough, when it came to the collar, it would roll over. So you'd get a sort of turn back collar, which could look nice. But I think that probably would be more suited to a more wintry style. So obviously, whenever you're doing this workshop, I've obviously started it in June, but you may actually join this course further on in the year, and you'll be following this video now thinking, what's she talking about, June? You might join in bleak February or something, and you wanted something really warm to wear. So yeah, if you kept going with the rib, you could end up with a really nice cozy collar. But that's the beauty of this design, is you can adapt it all the time. So you can make a summer version or a winter version, and you can change up the yarn. So obviously if you use a thinner yarn, you're definitely gonna need more rows on your hexagons before you can start to fit them, but that will give you a different look. That's great. Okay, so I think I've taken you past all the tricky spots, and you're just going to keep going, and you can see now how that rib is looking pretty nice, and it's pulling in, and it's just giving that a little bit of elasticity that we want in a rib. So I think I'm happy with that depth of rib. I'm just going to finish after this second row of front post, but carry on as much as you like, and then we're going to do the hem, which doesn't have to be the same depth. I actually probably will make the hem the same depth as my cuff, because I quite like to do that. But you may have already guessed the way that we're going to do it. We're going to work into the row ends, and we're going to do and then work into the stitches with our half double crochets, just like we did when we started this edge here, and then we'll do the same rib effect. So you'll have one rib going that way, another rib going this way. But obviously I'm not going to leave you to your own devices to do that. I'm going to help you and show you how to do that as well. Okay. Okay, so this is the last part of my particular cardigan design. It's going to do the hem. So I've just done all the edging around the neck and the front, and that is my finished rib. So I'm happy with that depth now. So I've only done, I think, 3 rows, front post, back post, and now I'm going to probably do maybe just slightly deeper on the hem. But again, you can try it on and see what you think and decide as you go. Okie doke. So then I've just done the last part of that row, and I have slip stitched. I'll just remind you of that. So that was our last, my last front post. You might end on a back post, but it's the same thing that we're going to do here, is to just slip stitch into that stitch from the previous row to neaten it up, keep that edge going. Right, so it's slightly different here in that we've got just some stitches on the end, like the single crochet stitches. So rather than work across the rib and lose that part of the rib by working into the gap like we did with the granny stitch, I'm going to work my stitches into the row end. So it's more just a matter of spacing them evenly rather than any sort of exact science. So we're going to chain 1, and we've turned the work, so we're now working on the hem. We're going to do our rows of half double crochets. So just try if you can to pick up 2 loops from the side. It's not a specific, as I say, part of the stitch, but if I was to just go here, it probably might pull up a little bit and look a bit strange and make a hole. So I'm going to actually go into there to make my first half double crochet. And then the next most obvious place for me is here. So I'm going to go into there. And that's 2. And I think just to keep it from pulling up, I need to do 1 more into this side of the rib we've just made. So we've got 3 half double crochets making up the depth of the rib, which I think is fine. And now I can start working into my previous granny stitches. So we can see that we've got 3 there. So I'm going to work into that first one. And then I'm just going to go all the way across the hem, working into these easy and obvious stitches until I get to the other end, where I'm going to do the same thing and put 3 half double crochets along the edge of that previous row of ribbing. Okay, so I'm just going into my last easy stitch to work into on that hem, and then I'm going to do my 3 half trebles into this end, just trying to pick up any loops that I can on the end of the rows. Great. Okay, so that's our first row, so we don't need to slip stitch into anything, because now we can chain 1 and turn. And basically it's just the same now as we did for the neck edge, but a little bit easier because there's no tricky bits, no corners to get around or anything. So you can just make this hem rib as deep as you like now, and that will be the end of the cardigan if you've made it the way that I'm doing it. And all you'll need to do is take your darning needle, your large-eyed needle, and just sew in all your ends and make it look neat. But otherwise, you'll be done.